What is a disturbing truth that you know? Story 1. There are extremely poor parents in third world countries all over the world who actively have and sell their children for as 10K USD, which is a life-changing amount of money for many of them, to the groups behind the operation of places like what happened on Epstein Island, which is still going on somewhere else right now. Answer: I sponsored a child whose mother ended up selling her daughter to a sweatshop, basically. I wrote the mother. The ministry who did sponsorship said they have all their means met. They would not listen. It was not what this young girl wanted. It wrecks me still, and this was 15 years ago. I think of her often. It was the whole reason I went into sponsorship so that girls wouldn't be sold into slavery. I still don't know the whole motivation behind it. Story 2. There were 3 people eliminated in the factory I worked in. I passed by the site of their passing daily, and I'm not talking slip and fall deaths. I'm talking some guy unscrewing the vat that had chemicals that they used to clean out and reuse glass bottles because he thought it was empty sodium hydroxide. Thousands of gallons of the stuff, diluted, but still enough to scour skin. He died of kidney failure from all the sodium getting into his blood. The other 2 got their stupid heads stuck underneath a cargo lift. Story 3. I'm really an honest, caring, forgiving person and only want to be accepted. But because of something that happened when I was a minor and didn't understand the seriousness of the effects on my life, I didn't do what I was supposed to. And now I'm in a category of society that no one cares for. Being labeled as so when I know I don't have those issues or thoughts, but everyone and anyone will choose to use that to hurt me. My dog is literally my only friend, and I will most likely die from tragic end. Story 4. If you have a smart anything, smart fridge, camera sensors, etc., there are millions of unsavory people all over the world that already have your information. If you are living paycheck to paycheck, it's not because you are not trying hard enough. It's because the system is designed for you to fall and fail. Story 5. This is difficult to write. I found out after I broke up with a guy that he was in a pedo ring as a young boy. I heard it from the parents of another victim. The town was small back in the day. The pedos were businessmen, like the baker and the furniture store owner, and members of a fraternal organization. They preyed on the sons of their friends. They even set up an international student exchange program to bring in more victims. It makes me sick to think about it. I never go to that town. Story 6. Phosphate mines will be empty around year 2100 at constant rate of extraction. Our present industrial agriculture beyond petrol is using phosphate to fertilize the fields. It will be absolutely impossible to keep doing this if there is no more phosphate to be used, and phosphate isn't something you can synthesize, let alone create ex nihilo. To put it another way, industrial agriculture based on inputs will be completely impossible and will disappear. Mycorrhizal fungi are the organisms capable of accessing soil phosphorus when it's in a form that plants cannot assimilate. It always happened at one point or another. They provide phosphate and other nutrients to the plants in exchange of sugar, as they are unable to do photosynthesis themselves. An agriculture with soils rich in mycorrhizal fungi will be our only option by 2100. This supposes an undisturbed or very seldomly disturbed soil, meaning no-till farming, agroforestry, syntropic agroforestry, and so on. Story 7. The United States CDC knew that AIDS was caused by the HIV virus and not a cancer as early as the 70s. They further knew that hemophiliacs were getting infected because the pharma companies were getting the plasma for their coagulant substances from high-risk populations. They and the FDA told Big Pharma that all they had to do to not infect hemophiliacs was heat the plasma. Big Pharma didn't want to because it cost too much. So not only did the government do nothing about it, they didn't even want the hemophiliacs so they could choose a substances company that heated the plasma. By the late 80s, 50 of all hemophiliacs were infected with HIV. Source: documents released by the feds during the reauthorization of the Ryan White Care Act in 1995. Story 8. Up until 2019, the Pentagon was still using 8-inch floppy disks and computers from the early 1970s to coordinate nuclear weapon forces and emergency action messages used in nuclear warfare. It's both disturbing and a testament to how solid some of those old PCs were. Story 9. The egg industry, no matter if it's in a factory farm, cage-free or free-range farm, macerates male layer chicks alive because they don't lay eggs and they don't grow big enough to be valuable for meat. Also, this is a standard practice in the U.S. and many other countries, and very much legal because the Humane Methods of Slaughter Act doesn't include chickens and turkeys. They macerate around 260 million male chicks each year in the U.S. Story 10. When you look at a distant star, You're seeing it as it was thousands of years ago, right? Right? Consider this. You get on a spaceship and travel to a star system 1,000 light years away. You can't actually go the speed of light, but your ship can accelerate to 9. At that speed, it takes you 1,000 years and some change to reach the distant star. But because of the effects of relativity causing time to slow down for you, the faster you go, you only experience the trip as lasting a little under a year. You get to the distant star system, turn around and point a powerful telescope at Earth. What do you see? Why, it's Earth as it was 1,000 years ago. But hang on a sec. You experience the trip as only a few months, and when you look back at Earth, you see it as it was a few months after you left. From your perspective, the Earth you're looking at through the telescope hasn't changed at all. Your calendar on the ship says Nov 20th, and the light you're seeing from Earth is also from Nov 20th. Story 11. There's a full-blown genocide happening in Sudan right now. RSF fighters, the direct successors to the Janjaweed who perpetrated the Darfur genocide in the early 00s, just marched into El Fasher a couple weeks ago and went house to house, take down thousands of people for purely ethnic reasons. Violation as a weapon of war is extremely common. The government forces are not the good guys. They're still raping and eliminate civilians, their own people. They're just not actively genocidal about it. The war in Sudan has been actively raging for 2 years, and something like 300,000 civilians have died, with millions displaced. The war is causing a famine that could eliminate hundreds of thousands more. That's easily on par with, if not worse than, Ukraine. But it's not really making the news, and essentially nobody in the West who could do something about it. Even something as simple as putting pressure on UAE to stop funding supplying the RSF won't. People only seem to care about Gaza and Ukraine. Can we not manage more than 1-2 crises at a time? Story 12. Since there's a lot of comments about intimacy abuse here, here's one you probably haven't thought about as much. You probably know ARPist. Considering how many victims there are, and how many of them don't report it or even talk about it, chances are you probably know someone that has abused someone that way. You just don't know about it, and they'll never admit it if asked. Story 13. You can't recycle paper more than about 5 times. The fibers that give paper its structure break and can't be strung back together. Plastics can't be recycled even that much because the polymer molecules break down into smaller chains. A lot of your recycling ends up sold to third world countries to burn for fuel. Story 14. Said this on here before and had a long jerk argument with the ignorant assholes on Reddit about it. TBH, I should have stayed quiet, but ego and pride. Japanese grandfather was forced to fight in WW2 for Japan. He did not want to fight, but because WW2 and Bushido code he had too. He only told 2 stories of his time. 1. Japan was pulling out of Shanghai at the end of the war. Grandpa lost a coin toss with his friends in his company for the first boat ride out. He sat on the docks and watched the boat get sunk by Allied bombers. All of his friends and half his company died. 2. Last official mission. He was ordered to help with rescue efforts to find survivors after Hiroshima. He simply described his time as such. We were ordered to try to find survivors or bodies. All we found was ash. Edit because THX random Reddit user for the racist PM. My grandpa did not commit atrocities in Shanghai. He was only in the war from 1944 to 1945. He did not do a lot of anything in the war except for guarding supplies. Imagine Letters from Iwo Jima movie, but set in Shanghai. He truly just wanted no part of the war. Answer. Those are crazy stories. Thank you for sharing them. My wife's grandfather has a similar coin flip survivor story. He was in the U.S. Navy, manning the guns. He and his friend had to choose whose turn it was to go eat in the mess hall. They flipped a coin. Grandpa stayed in the gun turret, and his friend went to eat. Mid-meal, Japanese kamikaze attacked, crashed right where the mess hall was, eliminated his friend and many other people eating. Then he got PTSD from the funeral of burying them at sea. The splashes of the bodies being dropped got to him. He would get triggered when he heard water splashing when he got out. Story 15. As an intern many years ago, I was on a pediatrics rotation and admitted a 5-year-old little girl. I forget now what was wrong, but whatever it was required a urinalysis, which came back positive for semen. I was just an intern, and this was way above my pay grade. Top-level administration got involved, as did the police, and her care was managed by people with more stripes than me at the time. Story 16. I've worked in multiple restaurants for a decade and a half across 4 different states, including a lot of the big name chains. Most of their kitchens are deplorable, and they're charging you obscene prices for microwaved and prepackaged food. People really need to stop eating out. That's coming from a man whose paycheck relies on people eating out. And don't say, well, not my kitchen. If that's the real being honest with yourself, truth, then clap, clap. Because I spend most of my days fighting with managers and staff to maintain even the bare minimum of cleaning and food rotation standards. Story 17. You could do everything right and suddenly die anyway. Accidents do happen. My wife is a widow, and her previous husband was healthy, athletic, good genetic stock, and then had a stroke one random moment. Turned out to be glioblastoma, brain cancer, and he was dead 14 months later. No history of cancer in any other family member. Just one of those things. Guy at work lost his wife of 35 years when she was out getting the mail and was struck by a utility truck that hit a patch of dark ice. Died instantly, all caught on security camera. Right now, a burst of gamma radiation, a Mashaman, GRB, might be hurtling towards the planet from a supernova hundreds of lights years away. The Ordovician mass extinction 450 million years ago may have been caused by a GRB. We wouldn't even see it coming since it would arrive at the speed of light. The afterlife is full of people looking around like, Story 18. As long as there are substances addicts having babies, my job as a SPED teacher is secure. For our more profound crew, interventions typically start within months of birth and last their entire life. No advancements in technology can scaffold the overwhelming need for intensive specialized training lessons with hands-on activities, life skill management to allow independence, or at minimum group home transitional placements, and 1-1 remediation to keep those skills. Story 19. My sister was trafficked and on substances for years. My parents were divorced, and no one would believe me when I told them. She died 10 years ago due to all the substances abuse problems that damaged her heart. My mother, who had custody of us, denied the whole thing. I really want to cut ties with my mom. I'm already 20 years estranged from my dad. My mom is 77 now and refuses to live any semblance of a life. She still lies to me. I dislike her, yet I feel sorry for her, yet I don't care if I ever see her again. Story 20. The youngest person to have dementia was 17 years old. Any one of us could develop dementia at any time with no way to see it coming. You could be starting a family at 30-something, and within 2 years you'll need to be under care. While 90% of dementia patients are 65 and up, young onset dementia regularly references the 40 to 64 age range in medical texts, implying 40s is not extremely rare, though I couldn't find any studies with rates by age of diagnosis. I looked into this because I have extreme forgetfulness and disorientation, far beyond any reasonable amount at 30. When I was taking driving lessons, my tutor got scared when I changed lanes without signaling. I didn't even realize I moved over. Don't worry, I don't drive now. Time also travels extremely strangely for me. I sometimes find myself covered in sweat and with severe stomach and throat pains after not taking a drink for hours. Sometimes my can was empty, and I realized I kept sipping an empty can over and over while telling myself, I'll go get a new one soon each time. Longest one seemed to be around 7 hours, based on the messages I never looked at, despite the indicator, which I always have to clear. It's scary. Story 21. Not new, but still relevant. We absolutely have zero control over the world. You might think we do, with governments and shoot, but in reality, nobody has fucking control. We live in a loop of fear and lies. How the fudge are the people able to get out of it? We can't. We're completely stuck. We're so deep in all of this that they could say one thing and, well, all fucking eliminate each other over it. Y'all saw what happened with COVID, and even at the start of COVID, we're in a non-stop, unbreakable loop that's been going on since we've had governments and people of power. It will never end. We can think and believe that we have the power to stop them, but again, that loop of fear and lies overrules everything. We take one step forward and 4 steps back. We are trying all over the world to break this, but still, only a few have succeeded, and that only leads to war. The human race will only find peace in passing. The living will suffer until then. Answer: if you can accept this and find happiness, though, it becomes a new level of peace. I rarely manage it, TBC, but those rare moments of nothing matters, I have to live in this system, so let's make it as good for myself and mine while doing as minimal harm to others as is within my own power. That actually work out? All the sweeter for knowing the odds against you. Story 22. People can become absolutely certain they remember something that never happened, and then act on that false memory as if it were real. 2 people can experience the same moment and later remember genuinely different realities. Entire life decisions can be shaped by something the brain invented. The human mind can deceive the person living inside it without them ever realizing it. Story 23. I know how much PepsiCo paid or lobbied Congress in 2003 to eliminate a bill that would have prohibited certain additives in junk foods proven to physically alter brain chemistry in growing brains, causing an addiction-like response. Also, the proposed bill would have limited the way in which PepsiCo and other advertise junk food to children. Money well spent. The bill died in committee. The childhood obesity data, findings of altered brain structures, the leaked predatory advertising tactics. All of it buried for nearly 9 years. Story 24. Amazon are hiring and firing logistics officers. They headhunt out the army. Not sure how they headhunt. It's possible they just apply and are preferred applicants, but it is a thing Amazon does. I can't help but feel this hurts the military arm that's most relevant at the moment. Amazon gets through a lot of managers too, so I can't say it's malice, but I felt it was. Most won't last a year. Sorry, but sauce is just me. I have written to an MP about this, not fearing court because it should be easy to prove. Story 25. Fun fact, oxygen is slowly eliminate us. Each moment we live in the short term by breathing it in, the byproducts from the process degrade our own cells and move along the aging process or potentially the development of diseases. It's poetic somehow that the oxygen that gives us life also ultimately takes it away. I wonder what would happen if we found a good way to counteract it. Other things contribute to aging passing too, of course, like the slow degradation of DNA, but it's an interesting thought. Story 26. When people hear human trafficking, they automatically think intimacy crimes, but it can be the cleaning staff in your hotel, the people who cooked your meal, the people building that new office down the street, the people who made your tennis shoes, the people who harvested your produce. Story 27. TW violation. Male orangutans commonly physically restrain and violation female orangutans in any orifice and will severely injure them to get them to comply. Males are easily 2-3x the size of females. They will even violation wounds they have given the females, such as deep puncture wounds they make with their massive canines. Everyone thinks they're such majestic and gentle giants because they're not as rowdy and noisy as other apes like chimps or bonobos, and they have their cool hair, but they're very violent in their own ways. It's probably the most difficult and uncomfortable thing I have ever witnessed. Source, am former zoologist. Story 28. An infamous man in our community would come into my place of work. At first, he would show me his art books he'd published, then he'd gift some to me, then he started telling me his life story. The thing is, he's terrifying, and he always has been. Everyone's parents would tell them to never accept rides from this man, don't talk to him, etc. Eventually, he was really getting deranged. He would cause issues for other patrons. Follow me home. Once he told a female police officer that he had fudged some women up to get the attention of a motorcycle gang. And it peaked one day when he came in and casually told me that in the 1980s, he'd take down a woman and left her in the woods not far from where he lived. He straight up confessed to this takedown. I called the police. I sat with a detective and told them exactly what he said. I know who this woman is. I was told to avoid him at all costs. Don't talk about it. The police served him with a restraining order for the business. He stopped coming around. A few years later, he committed tragic end. So now I know this secret that can never be proven in court, and I'll never know if the police got anywhere in their investigation. I was told very clearly by the detective that I should not under any circumstances tell anyone in our town what this man told me. He didn't elaborate on why. He was from the larger city where the takedown woman was from. I don't think he had any ties to our town, but it felt like he was aware of some dynamic that I am completely in the dark about. Every few years, I feel the need to tell my partner to remember that we know that this man confessed to a fairly unknown takedown from 40 years ago. It makes me feel sick. Story 29. My family member is severely mentally ill and is reenacting all her traumas in her life. She passes and projects really well, reverses her role in any relationship issue, so she is the victim and is like a functioning alcoholic in that she is stable enough so nobody would say anything or intervene. And our family is dysfunctional, so they wouldn't really ever encourage her to get help. It's so sad to watch. And yet she is far too reactive to be open to a conversation about mental health or therapy. I love her and miss the relationship we had. Story 30. Slavery is still very much happening in the United States and many other places. When women and children want to come to America through the border illegally, sometimes they are kidnapped by the cartels and forced to pay off the debt they bestow on these poor people for getting them over the border, even if they paid them already. They are then forced into prostitution for years or even decades. Some are taken down if they resist. There are estimated over 200,000 missing children that came here during the Biden era. And even if 1% was put into intimacy slavery, the pain and suffering is staggering to me. Story 31. that my boss's boss is intimacy harassing the young women at work. He's not attacking them, but he's more than crossing the line. At least 7 women have told me this, and I've told my boss this, but nothing is going to happen as HR will cover it up, and the pervert knows too many powerful people. If I report it, the women will not publicly say anything, and I'll look like a liar. Story 32. I knew the location of a guy who went missing over a decade ago. Why? Because I had his old number. His gigantic family was super nice to me after I explained that I was, at the time, a random Canadian teenager who had just got a new phone. Before I could even talk to anyone else, my phone was full of messages from them asking where man's name had gone, lamenting that it was Xmas without him, etc. They'd put together a gathering and everything. They were a large Punjabi family who owned several pizza places and invited me to dine with them. I had to turn them down as I was a minor, etc. at the time, but they were very sweet and I let them still text me. They explained their adult son had gone missing. Suddenly. Problem was, I kept getting texts from his friends too. Friends who explained, after I politely asked what was going on, that he wasn't exactly in any danger. He was gay, his family didn't accept that, and had put pressure on him to find a wife, etc. So he took off to a different redacted country instead. I even knew what part of it he was in. The friends had helped him leave. His family may have been warm to me, but as a queer person myself, I knew exactly what was up. He was obviously in the right to leave them behind, so I said nothing. I kept my darn mouth shut. I wasn't going to be the sudden stop to his happiness. I'd never met the guy, never spoken a word, but I felt kinship with him. I also wanted to escape. I'm 30, and I still do. Good for him, you know? I eventually heard, don't remember how, this was like 2013 to 17, that police had found the man and confirmed he was safe and that he did not wish to return home. Also, I changed my number, so I have no idea what happened after that. I don't remember how to spell the guy's full name. It's Punjabi, IDK. And also, I kind of don't think it's right to pry any further. I felt really weird being involved in this at that age, explaining that my phone was blowing up constantly because the man had like 4,000 cousins who always added him to group chats without knowing it wasn't his, etc. I feel now like I should have asked for a new number. Story 33. Most people you meet are living their lives on default settings. They never consciously choose their beliefs, habits, or values. They simply absorb them from family, society, or circumstance. As a result, entire lifetimes can pass without someone ever discovering who they actually are versus who they were taught to be. Story 34. I worked for TJ Maxx in college. When retailers ask for donations at the register, those donations don't go to the actual charity. In our break room, we had a poster for a charity drive we were running. It said the goal was a certain amount of money. But the truth was the store already made a donation slightly smaller than that. And the donations customers gave was the store recouping its loss and then some. Story 35. I used to live in Milwaukee in the late 1990s. Occasionally, I'd drive one of my coworkers home that lived next door to Dahmer's old apartment building. It was still standing then. But worse than that, the 2 cops that released the underage kid to Dahmer's care were still on the force. Also, for a bonus round, I had family in Wichita. The last turn to get into their neighborhood had an unremarkable house in the left and really old KFC on the right. On one trip, the house was torn down, but there wasn't anything with it. When I asked my aunt, she nonchalantly mentioned the owner got in some trouble. It was Dennis Rader's home, also known as BTK. Don't believe for a moment that these things happened somewhere else. Story 36. After the surrender of Imperial Japan in 1945, my country, USA, let the notorious Unit 731 off the hook, scot-free. I hear it's because they had chemical weapons data, and we didn't want the Soviets to have it. Now, I don't usually believe in the idea of evil, but Unit 731 was definitely evil. Story 37. There's no karma, no cosmic order, no purpose lurking behind the noise. Passing erases you completely. The lights go out, and nothing remembers you. We invented gods and religions as sedatives for a terrified brain that can't survive the truth. We can't fathom billions or trillions. Our minds break long before the universe even begins. And when you finally see that scale for what it is, every human meaning collapses into a quiet, merciless lie. Story 38. There are companies that make targets of armed women and children so cops can practice shooting without hesitation. One site even mentioned they have some customers who make custom targets of their own family members. Edit, armed, not unarmed. They are targets of pregnant women holding guns and things like that. Still fudge up. Story 39. The current state of animal agriculture is built on the suffering of animals. Old McDonald's farm is mostly a thing of the past, while massive so-called factory farms churn out incredible quantities of animal products while neglecting animal welfare practices. Story 40. I grew up in a bad neighborhood. One of the people I grew up with is doing life for a takedown his friend committed. His friend has since gave up the gangster shoot, moved states, and has a family and good career now. Meanwhile, he will probably die in prison because he wouldn't snitch on his friend. It's so well known that there's even a pretty famous rapper from my area who has mentioned it in a couple songs. Story 41. I don't live in the UK, but I watched a documentary about a fire in an apartment building using this special insulation. The kicker was it backfired because of renovations, and the whole thing turned into a terrible fire that couldn't be stopped due to how the insulation functions. The disturbing part is they are still working to remove this kind of insulation in buildings there. Story 42. There are doctors who decide who should die and somehow implement it. I once dated a pediatrician who was extremely mild-mannered, loved by his patients and their families, and well-respected in the community. He told me about a time when a mother had given birth to a profoundly disabled newborn whose chances of having a normal, independent life were slim. So while the infant was still in the hospital, he instructed one of the nurses whom he said he implicitly trusted to administer something to the child to end things, and she did. Story 43. I live a few neighborhoods away from a neighborhood called Howard Beach. There was a famous case no so long ago about a jogger being taken down. Anyways, in that neighborhood, the police have found homeless being taken down with no trace, always done in the forest near the area. Rumors has it, a cop is cleaning the streets, hence why there is no news about it, but who knows? Story 44. The pillars of society are hardly that. Like, think of any major piece of active infrastructure, water, electricity. And I can tell you that there's like maybe 4 retired people who have key knowledge of them. And if they were to die too close together, we are fudge. COVID was a reminder that the systems we have in place are frail. Story 45. I work in research funding, so have a pretty wide-ranging view of the problems our species and planet are facing. Soil quality, falling crop yields, rising sea levels, microplastics, pollinators, biodiversity, rising temperatures, antimicrobial resistance, AI power drain, accelerating climate change and water shortages, and so much more. Far too little is being done and far too late. We are utterly fudge. A great deal of effort, money, and resources being put into distracting people from these issues and stoking social divisions. If everyone is angry about engineered problems, they won't blame those responsible for the real ones. Ask yourself why the richest people on the planet own a lot of the media. Story 46. As a therapist, not only is your reality mostly based on perceptions and not hard facts or truths, but as much as 50 of your memories are fabricated, which mean that almost every argument you ever had, especially in a couple, are completely, utterly pointless. Story 47. Most olive oil you buy at the major grocery stores is fake. It's basically 80-90 canola oil with 10-20 olive oil. They suspected correctly that American consumers were too clueless to know the difference. Only Trader Joe's and Costco guarantee their olive oil to be 100 pure. Story 48. I don't know if it's disturbing, but anytime you see an ad or a design and think, wow, that's trash, the graphic designer thinks the same. He thinks he did a terrible work. He thinks it's ugly, but the customer wanted it like that, so he had to do it like that. Sometimes they even hide tiny DDEX or other symbols on the design to show their dislike of the design. Story 49. Measles resets your immune system. All those antibodies you've got from years of colds and stomach bugs and sore throats. Yeah, measles is cleaning those out. If you're lucky enough to recover from measles, you could still be catching every disease you've ever had all over again. Story 50. Most of the software you depend on is held on by duct tape, Elmo glue, hope, and prayers. Making hardened software that is secure and fail-safe is just too expensive. Until it bankrupts a company and possibly eliminate people, then the programmers get blamed for poor business decisions. Also, AI won't take your job, at least not with current technology. The math behind it is a dead end for real AI, and we've already reached its end. Most recent investments in the space have negligible return on investment, because fundamentally what's missing is that the current AI models have zero understanding of anything. That's not solvable with the current technology behind the models. It just sounds smart. This also means we're heading for a new unprecedented in our lifetimes recession. Again. Because of tech bros, again. Story 51. None of my grandfather's children are his biological children, and all of them had different fathers. After both of my grandparents had passed away, I was clearing boxes from their attic and found a box full of paternity tests. I have no clue if my grandfather was aware of this or if my grandmother had kept it from him, though I suspect he knew, because why would my grandmother be keeping evidence of her infidelity otherwise? None of his children know. Story 52. Most media contests, radio call-in, TV, mail-in, email, etc., are 100 rigged. We would see a list of names of people that signed up and would choose a name that sounded or looked funny and give them the prize. Radio call-ins will say that the most interesting sounding caller is the winner. They don't care at all about the fifth caller, etc. Story 53. Slavery is still going on, but in the form of child trafficking, where children are pimped and forced to adult worker. The number of children who are currently slaves is actually higher than in any other recorded period of time in history. There are documentaries and movies about it, and nobody seems to care. Story 54. Sometimes when a male horse is trotting, you hear a gurgling, whistling sound. That sound actually comes from the male body part, when air is drawn into the prepuce, the foreskin, because of the muscle pressure pulling it upwards, like those slide whistles. Story 55. People think pedophiles look like a dude who hasn't showered in a week and lives in mom's basement. In reality, what's not really talked about is there are both male and less commonly female pedophiles, because a female teacher sleeping with minor student is a pedophile. They come from all races, educational backgrounds, levels of wealth, all professions, not just priests or cops. They're one of the most difficult offenders to profile because there is no pattern. Story 56. That we are so incredibly dependent on the internet and electricity that if either went out for longer than a few days, all hell would break loose. Supply chains would deteriorate. Food, drinks, and gas would run dry very quickly. Once the backup generators run out of gas propanogasoline, things would get worse. Hospitals would shut down. People would start dying from medication withdrawals and life-saving medicines. Dialysis patients would drown in their own liquids. People with disabilities that have relied on powered scooters, smart devices like Alexa Siri to handle emergency phone calls, TVs, lights, etc., would be left in the dark completely. The world is about 1 week away from total devastation if the internet or power ever goes out, and people seem to downplay it. Very few in modern-day society know how to grow their own food, collect safe food, hunt food, or raise cattle. Very few know how to filter water, and even less have the antibodies to survive on unfiltered water. We have gone so far with our abilities to clean and eliminate bacteria and viruses that we have actually devolved our abilities to handle and survive bacteria and viruses in the wild. We are beyond blessed to live in this society, but we would be like helpless toddlers without our modern daily conveniences. Story 57. People have mentioned about child abuse, but what people haven't talked about is child-to-parent violence, CPV. Basically, where it is reversed, where the child is the abuser and the parent is the victim. According to the National Institutes of Health, HIH, it states that the meta-analysis involving 25,000 participants revealed that the overall prevalence of CPV against both parents was 34.8. Subgroup analyses indicated that physical violence prevalence was 10.0, while psychological violence was significantly higher at 82.6. Under CPV, which is a form of family violence, children hurt their parents financially, psychologically, or physically. This type of violence presents serious difficulties for impacted families, as well as society at large, because of its negative impacts on well-being and familial connections. When compared to other types of family violence, CPV has received less academic attention despite its frequency and effects, which has resulted in a dearth of thorough studies and intervention techniques. This is very under-researched and less talked about, mainly because, although child abuse is horrible and needs recognition, when it comes to CPV, it gets more complex legally because many will blame the parent for it from bad parenting, being abusive themselves, and so on. However, the thing is that CPV is very common than most people think. There are plenty of teenage boys who have ended up in juvie for assaulting their mothers, and quite a few who have even violation their mothers. I feel like CPV needs to talked about more. Story 58. That we waste the majority of our life due to worry about money. Many will die without doing the things they could have or should have done due to money. We postponed a lot of things that never got done later. The things we said would get to, when things calmed down, quietly slipped through our fingers while we were busy doing life. We never took that cruise in the British Virgin Islands with friends. Sure, you saved the money and got a lot of work done at the office. But now that our health is slipping and friends are dying off, that extra money seems kind of pointless. Would much rather have the memories and experiences. At this point, you will be making plans to give that extra money away to a charity when we die. Story 59. I've always been a bit on the morbid macabre side, but once I became a mortician, I realized that my tendency to think on the dark side was actually well warranted. I now know that most people will never realize the amount of murderers, professional con artists, and truly evil people they meet every single day and have no clue. And they may even be your very own family. Story 60. Most don't know how impactful experiences are immediately after birth. Many people assume that because children don't remember their first few years of life, that they don't impact them. This is false. Children need a secure attachment to their caregivers in infancy in order to have healthy relationships later in life. It impacts them forever. Child abuse like neglect, verbal abuse, intimacy abuse, humiliation, etc. Even in infancy negatively impacts attachment because it affects their brain development. The brain is literally being built and rapidly making neural connections through every experience and interaction. It affects how the brain interprets relationships for the rest of their life. In adulthood, if you seek help, it takes years of therapy to learn about yourself and find tools to cope with it, but there is no undoing these changes. This is what creates personality disorders like narcissism, borderline PD, etc. Story 61. My high school friend's uncle is a rapist. He is a pedo. He violated my friend's sister and intimacy abused my friend while they were little girls. Her mother knows, but her response was, woman born to suffer, and she lived worse things than what the uncle did to them. They never reported it or told my friend's father. Her parents are divorced because he physically abused her mother and almost eliminated her, but was overprotective with my friend and her sister. I can't report it because it happens when they were kids and now they are adults. There is no proof that could put that man on prison. My friend and her sister suffered so much for it. Her sister disliked man and doesn't let them touch her. My friend suffers from ED and PTSD because of this. And the mother still forced them to interact with that uncle. When she was telling me this, she was crying and almost have a panic attack. Story 62. I brewed my coffee like I did any other day. Then after my husband and I enjoyed our cups, I went to discard the filter and grounds only to discover the boiled corpse of a broad-faced sac spider under the filter. I now compulsively inspect the coffee machine before brewing. My husband still doesn't know, and I'll be taking this to my grave. Story 63. My paternal grandfather was a Nazi, somehow wound up in Du Bois, Pennsylvania. He was a violent alcoholic whose wife died of TB when my dad was 3. Gave him to a Catholic orphanage. After that, he had 2 more wives that went completely missing. My maternal great-grandfather was a Grand Dragon in the KK. My uncle has a pic of him in his robe in his coffin out in a giant cornfield with a single file line of hundreds of other Klansmen paying their respects. And no, I haven't talked to my family in a very long time. I left a long time ago. Story 64. My step-parent is dying of stage 5 cancer, my bio told me. They refuse to tell anyone on their side of the family, even though they are close. They haven't told my siblings either. So it's just me keeping a secret I never wanted and don't agree with the circumstances of, as in, I don't agree they should keep it secret. Story 65. The chainsaw was originally designed as a medical instrument used in childbirth to widen the birth canal. There is evidence that some of the Challenger crew survived the initial explosion as several breathing packs were activated before the module hit the water. Answer: they were alive as the breakup was not sufficient to incapacitate or eliminate them, but in all likelihood, and thankfully, they passed out long before they hit the water. They broke up at about 49,000 feet and coasted up to almost 70,000 feet in a shredded crew compartment exposed to the ambient atmosphere at very high altitude without pressure suits or breathable oxygen. Those air packs were for ground escape and were useless at altitude, and turning them on shows that they were starting to pass out and trying anything, no matter how futile. Ignore sickos that want you to think they watched the Atlantic come up to meet them. They were awake long enough to take a series of valiant actions after the breakup, recorded in the air packs in the switch positions, but not much longer than that. Story 66. The U.S. government massively conspires with foreign countries to silence the political expressions of Americans whose views become inconvenient to the elite power structure. This isn't new or a Trump-specific thing. It's been happening since the Bush and Obama eras at the minimum. We aren't free people. We're just kept in a cage with invisible bars that most of us never happen to run into because we're too busy running in the hamster wheel they put in the cage to occupy us. Story 67. This is not nearly as dark as many of these other facts, but most people have microscopic bugs that live and lay eggs in the hair follicles on your face, such as your eyelashes and eyebrows. They eat your dead skin cells and skin oils, crawl out at night to mate, then eventually die and release all their built-up feces onto your face. Story 68. This isn't super disturbing, but it disturbed me. I used to work in a charity shop in London, and it really opened my eyes. About 80 of the clothing donations never made it to the shop floor. They were sold off for pennies per kilo to a ragman for textile recycling. Most fast fashion items don't have a resale value, i.e. Shein, Temu, Primark, etc. But here's the thing. Most of it isn't actually recycled. It gets packed into bales and shipped to countries like Ghana to be resold, but the quality is usually so poor that a huge percentage ends up as waste. A lot of it ultimately gets dumped in open landfills, on beaches, or near waterways, burned in the open because there's no proper waste infrastructure, polluting the environment with microplastics and chemicals as it breaks down. On top of that, the flood of ultra-cheap secondhand clothing can undercut local textile industries, making it harder for local manufacturers to survive. It's wild how much of our donations are basically just waste exports. Story 69. Every chronically ill person has medical trauma, often in the form of abuse, neglect, malpractice. When I go to the ER, I'm not scared that my body is failing me. I'm scared that someone might abuse me when I'm at my most vulnerable, and I am far from the only chronically ill person who has this fear. Many of us have decided to just stop going to the ER after too many bad experiences. Story 70. The most disturbing truth that I know for a fact is existential. And before people tell me that isn't a fact or things can change, and you don't know that for sure. Yeah, I've thought about all that plenty. That I live on this strange and spectacular planet and have consciousness about my own existence. It's really, truly a very anxiety-inducing realization. I'm alive for a while, and sometimes it feels long, but increasingly seems short. But in all likelihood, this is it. I'll die someday in my entire experience, and that self-realization will just cease to be. Of course, it won't matter because I won't have a thought about it anyway, but it's incredibly depressing and hard to think about. We've created ways to cope with this fact. Believing in afterlife is, of course, helpful for many people, and that's a good thing. Story 71. The passing of Lacey Fletcher haunts me to this day. For the last 12 years of her life, she was confined to her parents' couch due to locked-in syndrome, and her parents didn't want to take care of their adult child. Her parents went on a trip and didn't have anyone check in on her. When they returned, she was dead. Her body was fused to the couch. Maggots and excrement all around her. Answer: this poor girl's story haunts me. I think about her a lot and hope she is in a better place now, though I can hardly think of a worse one. She didn't deserve to be so utterly abandoned by her parents. From what I understand, and I could be wrong, they were far more concerned about their public image than caring for and seeking help for their daughter. So long as the optics of their lives looked good, they didn't pay any attention to the reality of their actions or lack thereof. It seems to me they were embarrassed by her and so ignored her, deeming Lacey nothing more than an inconvenience that didn't deserve any of their precious time. It truly makes me feel sick. How do people live with themselves when they act with such vile motives? They knew what they did was wrong as they hid it from the outside world, evidently the only world they cared about. Story 72. As nurses, we sort of lie to family all the time, particularly in hospice, which is what I do and will speak from. Let me explain in non-maleficence. My care is for the patient. Do no harm. The benefit is for the patient's benefit only. Example: is there anything more we can do for my 92-year-old cancer-ridden heart disease grandma to get more time? Her son will be here in 4 days. Yes, I could fluids, sub-Q, O2 meds, pull back the morphine, push, ensure protein. Drink if they have a feeding tube for calories and laxative and just a smidgen, and I could get her a few more days, and in much more pain and anxiety. My answer: I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do. I don't care that you want more time with your mom or dad or grandma. I will tell you there is nothing more, because there is nothing more for the patient here. It's just needless suffering for the family to benefit from. And so I offer the pain meds, I offer to increase with MD approval, and with that approval, I know I'll be walking them to the veil at this point to cross over. Let me edit in a disclaimer here. All substance education and risks are laid out as part of what I do as reflex in training. Don't mention substances without risks and benefits, as in, this could be what does it, but it will make them more comfortable, etc. My mind prepares to get you all to acceptance, as in 45 minutes, their breathing will stop when it hits. They will blame the meds or say it was too strong, etc. I once had a woman, barely retirement age, sorta, vomiting blood every 30 minutes, got the whole family to acceptance, cheered her on, telling her how beautiful she looked, how incredible she was doing, how we were almost there and almost done. She smiled, sipped water, vomited blood. I wiped her face, put a cool cloth on her forehead, and gave her more water. She closes her eyes and I offer her pain meds and her Dilaudid, and she said yes. We all smiled and nodded at each other, tears in our eyes, and she said she felt better. Vomiting slowed a little. She had some energy to talk to everyone, and I said, you need to say all that you can now. 2 hours later, she was gone. I told them passing was here that day. I didn't tell them that I came to assist. It wasn't for them. It was for her. After she's gone, it will be all about the family for the next 13 months. That's a bereavement team. My goal is pre-bereavement acceptance. Answer, my father decided it was time and stopped taking his meds and progressively got worse, and it tore my mother up. I encouraged him to continue to try, at least for mom. Finally, at the last visit, I realized he was just tired. I knew it wouldn't be long. I visited him daily, had long conversations with him, got him anything he wanted. By the time we started in-house hospice, it was only 1 week and he was gone. The hospice nurse was wonderful. My mom couldn't really cope at that point, and she helped take care of him and her as well. I wasn't there when he left, but I saw him a few hours before he passed. He went at home with family around him, and I was grateful for those final moments. Thank you for all you do. May you have abundant blessings in this world always. Story 73. Due to rapid advances in missile and anti-missile technology on America's side since the Cold War, mutually assured destruction is almost certainly broken as a concept, which ironically makes the world less safe for America. Any opponent nation that knows this must, if playing logically, strike first in order to have any chance of victory, and thus are much more trigger-happy than when they were assured that America also had skin in the game, regardless of first strike capabilities. Story 74. We're all going to die someday, and we don't know when or how, and we're expected to just walk around and live life without worrying much. I think the scariest part is that I know how many mistakes I've made, and that if I die tomorrow, I can't fix them or apologize. Story 75. In the Muti religion, they actually believe that young virginal women can cure AIDS. Muti and virgin myths. The term Muti refers to traditional African rituals, sometimes involving human body parts, often from women and children, based on the harmful false belief that having intimacy intercourse with a virgin can cleanse blood of diseases like HIV AIDS or provide protection. These are dangerous superstitions and have no basis in reality or legitimate religious teaching. People pay a great deal of money to secure these magic potions. Story 76. That you almost never know when you're seeing someone for the last time. One day, it's the last time you hear your parents climb the stairs, the last good night from a partner you think you'll marry, the last dumb inside joke with a friend you assume you'll know forever. But in the moment, it's just Tuesday, just another conversation, just another see you late. Story 77. Male chickens in industrial egg production are shredded as soon as they hatch. Male calves are torn from their mothers in dairy industry and eliminate straight away or raised a few months and eliminate for veal. It is disturbing. What horrendous creatures are we humans? Story 78. The universe is in a state of false vacuum. It has a minimum non-zero amount of energy in the vacuum of space. If there ever to be a true vacuum, like zero energy in an area, it would spread outward at the speed of light, rearranging space-time to be in this base state and unravel all organized matter. We would disappear irrevocably, completely, in the blink of an eye. It could start anywhere at any time, and it is completely unstoppable. Story 79. We are ruled by psychopaths on both sides, and they have propagandized the masses to such a degree that not only are we never ever voting ourselves out of this, the population will never rebel in any meaningful way. And if it did, the parasite class would happily take down us. There is no endgame in this scenario, but collapse of civilization and probably the global ecosystem. Story 80. One disturbing truth I've realized is that most people only really notice or care about problems that affect them directly. It's kind of scary, but it also makes you appreciate the rare moments when someone genuinely helps without expecting anything in return. Story 81. COVID is a vascular disease, prematurely aging blood vessels, contributing to microclots, disrupting brain function and cognition, and so much more. Even if you are mild or asymptomatic, even if you are healthy, COVID's effects are as far from a common cold as a mosquito bite is to chickenpox. Story 82. There is a lake in northern Oregon, not too far from civilization, but upstream nonetheless. Recently, within the last 8 years, recreational scuba divers just goofing around came across a trove of more than 20 55-gallon drums with biohazard signs on it in Weird Army coding, which said 24D and 2 5T, After contacting authorities, it was determined the containers contained a military defoliant, Agent Orange to be exact. The drummer estimate to be at least 50 years. They have been considering ways to remove them, but they are so fragile that they can't. Like I said, this has been there for years. And one day those bottles will leak, and a lot of trees will die, and a lot of babies will be born deformed. I have a simple solution, darn. Or divert the stream that fills the lake. Drain the lake. Drill into the top facing side of the drums. Safely suck the contents out. Remove the canisters once empty, and do any environmental protection. Practice is required due to potential contamination. But I doubt that idea has even crossed the committee's mind. Story 83. Even mild COVID infections can cause serious health problems and permanent damage to your body. It's mostly disturbing because people act like because it hasn't hurt them, it won't. Not true. And people act like catching repeatedly is totally fine. It's not. Story 84. Your mind controls reality, but it's not that simple. There are subconscious drives that can dictate reality, which no one has any control over. You can observe things into reality if things synchronize. On a collective level, this manifests itself as great political and religious upheavals. Story 85. Crows can remember human facial features and they hold grudges, remembering bad interactions with people for many years. They can also pass this knowledge to their offspring and others in their takedown, creating a generational grudge. Don't fudge with crows. Answer. This is one of my favorite trivia facts, and people really tend to gloss over the implication of that last part. The fact that they have some sort of storytelling ability means their language methods of communication are at a level of complexity that we really don't tend to assume animals, other than us, possess. Crows can also complete complex multi-step puzzles and do basic math calculations at around the level of a 7-year-old human IRC. They also have some sort of concept of reciprocity display of gratitude and will leave gift trinkets in place of food left out for them regularly by humans they trust. They're so fudge cool. Story 86. Now, this depends a lot on the study, but basically there's a pretty high chance at least 110 people you know have acted on some sort of socially despised paraphilia. An example, for instance, is bestiality. Depending on the study, which again should be taken with much salt due to regional or group biasing, there's occurrence rates between 10 and 50 of people at some point in their lives. Some studies included intimacy contact without penetration, even once, so the numbers are somewhat difficult to pin. But it's likely way higher than most people would expect. Pair that with other ones, pedophilia, necrophilia, etc. Yeah, a lot of folks around us are likely doing a lot of things society says are awful, but it'll never see the light of day. I will admit again that these studies aren't always perfectly applicable or accurate to every place on Earth. Many are done on prison populations or in other countries or in small, carefully selected and targeted groups. Story 87. Most people who try to commit tragic end by jumping in front of a moving train are unsuccessful, often meaning they jump too early or too late and wake up in hospital disfigured instead of dead. Speaking Toronto specifically, my area of expertise, it happens so often that the media are not allowed to report it unless it was a homicide attempt, i.e. they were pushed. While on an affected route, you'll hear injury at track level. As the reason for delay, holiday seasons create higher volume of jumpers naturally. Think daily. Otherwise, it can happen weekly while riders are none the wiser. Story 88. According to high-level insurance industry internal research, climate change has gone well beyond the point of return, and we are basically fudge. It is only a matter of time until the big reinsurers will not be able to cover a major natural disaster, and the results will be catastrophic. Story 89. Human intimacy trafficking is far more common than you think in the world and especially in the United States. I know this because I recently started volunteering at an organization that helps survivors. The organization's president is a survivor sold into intimacy trafficking by her mother at 2 years old. Escaped her handler at 14. Many of her rescues are children. Most children are sold into it by their caregivers. Some are actually abducted. It's a horrifying industry. Story 90. The reason most people in the U.S. are overweight is because our food is calorie-dense and nutritionally devoid. Even if you eat low-calorie food, the processing has made it virtually useless to your body, so your body wraps it in fat to keep it from poisoning your body. Story 91. Approximately 62 of intimacy assaults go unreported. For every 1,000 incidents, less than 10 will result in convictions, and fewer than that will result in prison time. 1 out of 6 women are estimated to be victims of intimacy assault, while 1 out of 33 male are as well. Approximately 6 million women in America will become pregnant as a result of intimacy assault. Source for this, RAIN. If you feel up to it, go over the website and see how many people have been impacted and will continue to be. Story 92. I'm a home healthcare aide for senior citizens, and the amount of seniors living in neglect and squalor, even in facilities and oftentimes of the senior's own choosing, is appalling. The number of times I've walked into a home and thought Adult Protective Services really needs to step in here because this place is a biohazard has been far too many. Answer, my mother has dementia and mobility issues and requires help dressing and washing and getting around. We have home carers in addition to myself. One of our carers was away for a month this summer, and I thought about putting my mother in respite care so I could get a break. But every single place I visited was so awful that I just couldn't. And this was what they were showing me on a visit. Story 93. What's disturbing is how no one here mentions animal exploitation that's happening right now. Maybe because they are complicit? I don't know. What's disturbing is the apathy of humans. If we eliminate humans at the same rate as we do non-humans, we might as well kiss humanity bye-bye tomorrow. The numbers are so unbelievably high that it is hard for the human brain to grasp. It is so high that no human injustice compares. Now, yes, there is more eliminate in the wild between animals still, but at the very least, it is not the fault of humans. Story 94. In the 20th century, before cell phones were a thing, people who survived car accidents had to either wait a long time dealing with injuries and bleeding, hoping someone would notice on the road, or walk like zombies for miles along the road to the nearest telephone, which could sometimes mean entering on someone's doorstep to call for emergency. I believe this, alongside substances used back in the day, could the origin behind the zombie lores as we know of today. Answer, this makes me feel like I'm 1,000 years old and I'm not even 50. There used to be things called payphones and they were all over the place. It was free to call the police. Like every mile or so on the freeway, at every gas station, and if you did go to someone's house asking to use the phone because you'd been in a car accident, they would help you because no one had cell phones, so it wasn't weird. But more likely, if someone saw your car crash, people would help you. And or go to the nearest payphone and call 911. If you were in the U.S., though many countries had this too, not make you wait or walk all by yourself. If you were out in the middle of nowhere with no payphones or other cars, yeah, you're right, you were screwed. But that's also true now if your phone is dead. Story 95. At any given moment, Earth's magnetic poles will flip. We're long overdue. When this happens, our magnetic field will be weakened and a bit more complex. We'll be more susceptible to the sun's seething solar storms, meaning UV rays will totally weasel their way in even more. Cancer likelihood will be increased by at least 15 across the planet, as we'd be receiving much more charged particles. But on the literal and metaphorical bright side, the whole world will experience the glory of the majestic aurora borealis. Story 96. Bipolar disorder is genetic, with a high chance of passing it on to your kids. Bipolar disorder is a degenerative disease that slowly damages your brain unless you get medicine for it. Millions of Americans have bipolar and don't know it are slowly going more and more manic every day. Story 97. Violation and intimacy harassment of women and children is disturbingly common. Men and boys get it too, but at somewhat lower rates. Look up the stats and then think about what that means about how many people must be doing it. This many people being this fudge up explains why the world is so corrupt and fudge. Anyone willing to violation and molest is also probably willing to lie, cheat, steal, scam, etc. Story 98. An astonishingly large number of teachers look the other way on child abuse, especially if it's from people not from their own country. I explained that their view that this was cultural was nonsense. We beat our children and men violation their wives all the time a century ago. The West was awful too. We got past it. There is no excuse. Story 99. I've been working in biodiversity conservation climate change mitigation for over 20 years. We are fudge. Maybe not in a purely apocalyptic way, but anyone born in the next 10-15 years will grow up in a massively different world than the rest of us, and it won't be good. Story 100. I once saw someone say that many charities for awareness and treatment of mental illnesses like schizophrenia and bipolar disorder hope for a celebrity to come out and admit that they have that condition so it can be more understandable for the common people to see what people with the condition are like. Story 101. I once stopped the violent assault of a woman on a busy street. I learned I was one of 2 people who called the police and the only one who intervened. Another time I called 911 to report a homeless man wandering through traffic, pouring blood from multiple places. I got a call a couple months later that he had been placed in a coma and needed various surgeries. They called me because I was the only one who called 911 and were hoping I knew him. People aren't just expecting someone else to help, bystander effect. They're also just inherently selfish and don't want to get involved in other people's problems. Story 102. Tic Tacs use the fact that under a certain gram size can be rounded down when making serving sizes, at least in the US. So since the serving size is a single mint that is 0.5 grams or under, they can round down at post things like 0 calorie and no added sugar, even though sugar is the first ingredient. Story 103. Dolphins are horny AF, and if they're in captivity, not around other dolphins to engage, they can get frisky with humans out of intimacy frustration. I saw a video clip of one humping a woman and guys around her were laughing. Not cool, but now it's something I can't unsee. Story 104. The bug and flying insect population of the planet has reduced by roughly 60 since 1980. Very soon there will be no pollinators. General population don't care, or say, good, I dislike bugs. Microplastics in the clouds, the water we drink, in our blood, and possibly now in our DNA. Story 105. We're not real. Our conscious psyches are a projection, an illusion built from the stories we've collected over the course of our lives in the narrative we tell ourselves. I lost my episodic memory last year. Autistic burnout, trauma, possibly a silent stroke, not something common, leading to an extended period of disassociation. I'm getting over it. It's an understanding I've gained. However, I don't claim it's an absolute truth since we feel very real to ourselves. It's still very disturbing to realize. Story 106. That nobody is immune to propaganda or scams. Even the most diligent, intelligent, and hyper-aware people can find themselves wrapped up in a cult where they believe the Democrats and the government are fifth-dimensional beings from another planet hell-bent on drinking children's blood, or find themselves spending thousands of dollars on cleanses and obvious pyramid schemes. Answer: one of the most insane things was watching an ex-girlfriend I had been with for years was considering marrying fall down the hole of internet investing gurus, cryptos and then NFTs, and suddenly become a gambling addict throwing years' worth of savings at once into riskier and riskier meme coins. This person had an MBA from one of the most selective programs in the country and made over $500,000 a year. They'd have had it made if they literally did nothing else but save a little every paycheck. Probably still could have retired at 40 if she just stuck to index funds. It was a devastating breakup, but it was infinitely harder to admit that I just couldn't even reason with her anymore. Story 107. There could be a girl locked upstairs in any house on my street for the last 10 years, and I've spent 10 years not knowing I could save her. Ariel Castro, the one who did have 3 women in his house for more than a decade, including one having at least one baby and the other being beaten until she miscarried repeatedly, that was in a neighborhood maybe 20 minutes from here. Nobody had a clue. Story 108. War between roughly peer powers is a driver of progress, whether workers' rights, economic boons, etc. European states were forged by war and became so developed because of institutions which work better for war. Democracies in part emerged because war created states suitable for them. England and France became modern states because wars destroyed feudal decentralized societies from the strain of war, like French nobility being annihilated in the Battle of Crécy. Many stable regimes have emerged out of civil wars specifically, including the Rwandan Civil War's carnage being followed by the modern stable state that can go toe-to-toe with the much larger Congo. Wars allow reforms which should take place rapidly as well and promote competent rule through the incompetent side being subjected to the risk of destruction. Women's voting rights came about in response to the societal shifts of WW1 in many countries, where prior the matter had been continuing to be more ignored. War, most horrifyingly, is a natural part of states, where without conflict that stresses the system, there is a tendency towards stagnation, favoritism over competency, etc. China has been at its most advanced when facing an enemy such as itself during warlord periods, civil war, the Song Jin dynasty, or the modern day competing with the U.S. The risk of war with the Soviets put an end to the destructive Cultural Revolution. China stagnated and declined in isolation when facing no threats. Answer: I disagree. As an example, France and Germany were at war 3 times between 1875 and 1945. When they started to work together in the 1950s on energy policy, they began to see far accelerated progress, and they haven't been at war since. And to use your example, China has seen unprecedented growth and development during this century when they haven't been involved in any significant conflicts that I can think of. There's a good book on this called Humankind by Rutger Bregman, which argues pretty well that the history of human success is actually during the periods of peace and cooperation. Story 109. I have a friend that recently, last few years, became a multi-millionaire, and over the last year, people have invited him to do all sorts of abhorrent, insane shoot. Stories you read about hunting kidnapped humans, people paying to beat or eliminate violation people, or even pay to experience eating. Other people are all true. From what he tells me, he feels that they have access to all the normal, exciting experiences, so they start to crave the not-so-normal. The truth is, a lot of these people who go missing and never turn up, it's fully possible. This is where they end up going. Answer. These days in Croatia, we read about Sarajevo Safari. During the siege of Sarajevo in the 90s, a lot of rich foreigners from Italy, and where not, paid to shoot citizens of Sarajevo with snipers from hills and mountains surrounding city during the war. These rich monsters paid someone, Serbs I guess, to shoot at women, elders, kids, on streets during that bloody war already full of torture, violation, deaths. And none was punished for these terrible, sickening crimes. I'm feeling ill and sick just thinking about this. Story 110. No matter how careful, aware, gentle, or rough we are with our kids, we will fudge them up somehow, and that we also cannot fully protect them from predators. Also, religion doesn't impact our experience of the dying process as much as one would hope. A life well loved does. Pervasive mental illness, schizophrenia, bipolar etc., can truly appear out of nowhere anywhere in life, but primarily in your teens, 20s. Source, Am Trauma Grief Crisis Therapist. Story 111. The USA has the worst outcomes for maternal-infant mortality among all industrialized countries. It takes an education one can't get by being passed through the assembly line to avoid being a statistic. Most of the mortalities are preventable. The problem is the system of care.